Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode where we're going to be looking through the pages of the Book of Judges. This time we're looking at basically this introduction to Deborah, the prophetess, and we just looked at the bit with King, the King of Hatzor, which is Jabin. And last time I said perhaps I should show you one of the actual pictures from that. I'm just trying to bring up the right thing for you. HD. Okay. That one. Okay. There we go. And so this was the one I was referring to. It's a quite a well-known archaeological piece. It's like an ivory item that's sort of flat, and it's got this drawing on it, and it seems to be, archaeologists say, of a Canaanite king, and some people have said they think it might be like Solomon and things like that, but basically most sort of scholars say it's a bit early for Solomon and that, and and they think he's a Canaanite. But you can see the Sphinx on the sides of the chair and the harpist and things like that, which are all influences then on the image in question. So you can see the harpist on the left and the cherubim on the chair, and they were done in the style of another ivory that was found. So now on to Deborah. So it introduces Deborah as a prophetess, wife of Lepidoth, and she judged Israel at that time. What's interesting, I think, actually I haven't covered yet, is that a lot of the time when people study Judges, they think they think that the Judges run kind of concurrently, but also that there can only be one per time period and things like that. That's like a misconception which can get people confused. And aside from the fact that the time period is confusing in the book, because it seems as though it's 450 years, but it's actually only 250 years, which we talked about before, how that is achieved. There's also the fact that people are in different locations, and you might say, oh well, just using the fact that the time doesn't fit to say that there's more than one judge. But what I think a lot of people miss is that it's in Exodus where the judges thing begins, and you might recall that there's a bit where Moses is kind of going crazy with all the people asking him questions all the time, and the whole world's on his shoulder. And then Jethro, his sort of father-in-law, comes along and says, like, this isn't healthy, basically. You can't answer every question for every person, you've got to delegate. And then so they decide, oh yeah, you're going to delegate to this, that. And one of the things they do is set up judges. And so basically, if you've got a problem, you can go to somebody who's an appointed judge in your area and say, I've got a problem with this and that. And that's why at the bottom you've got these two guys having an argument, and the one's pointing at the other, and they're discussing this matter in front of Deborah. She's then the appointed judge to decide wisely between the dispute, and then obviously if these delegated judges can't deal with it, then they go to Moses' day Moses, in David's day David, and, the person who is the leader at the time. Now, so Deborah is judging with these guys. As can't avoid saying that it's obviously interesting that there's like a woman in position of authority in Israel. Some people take that to mean that, back in those days it wasn't as rigid. It's kind of gender roles about leadership and wisdom and being judges and stuff like that. That's one thing. The counter argument, of course, is that lots of things happen in Judges that are unconventional or there's lots of things that are bad, and so because there's things that are bad and good and everything, it doesn't actually give you much of an indication. In the background, you can see the hills of Ephraim, and so that was drawn from a photograph of the place, the locale. No specific, just the place that's in the hills of Ephraim, because that's all you get from the text. And then the next panel across, we introduce Barak, and he, try and get him on the screen, he's the leader then of the men of Naphtali, and so it's like one of the tribes. I was going to say 12 tribes, but he is a leader here. I've presented him. He's got a banner man with the symbol of Naphtali, which is the deer or whatever, antelope. And he's also got it on his staff. He has a staff because in one of the Psalms, and then also I think it's in Deborah's song, it talks about the leaders of the tribes having a staff of authority, essentially. So he's got that, and then you'll notice as you go through the book there are other people who've got them too. He is wearing a couple of things of interest. First of all, his badge or brooch or whatever that's holding his cloak, you'll notice has a lightning sort of bolt on it. And that's because Barak means lightning, and so I thought, represent his name up on it visually, but also perhaps the person, if that's his name. I thought it'd be cool to get made a badge with his name, with a symbol of his name on it. The man himself is obviously an Israelite, and he's wearing mostly Israelite kind of stuff, like his cloak and everything, but he's also a man who, in the story we basically discover, is kind of somewhat of a compromiser, or he's willing to he's not necessarily willing to get rid of the Canaanites if Deborah doesn't kind of help him. This is what happens. And so we can see the implication, of course, is that he says to her in a minute, I'll only go if you go with me. And but the implication is then that if you don't go, I'm not going to go. So it doesn't matter what's happening, I'm just not going to go, even though the situation's terrible and we're being made slaves and we're oppressed and stuff. But if you say you're not going to go, I'm not going to do anything about it. So that's it kind of puts him in that light, and so he's a bit of a compromiser. So visually, his clothes, his bottom half is like a Canaanite robe, so he's wearing basically a Canaanite robe with some armour over the top. It's actually Egyptian style armour, but it's the armour that these guys have got from their battles. Anyway, and at the top he has the horns of an antelope, which again are part of his sort of sigil. And so contrast that then with Deborah. She seems faithful Israelite woman. She's got her scarf. Part of her design, which if I actually show you a close up of her, it's easier to see. She has a little brooch as well, and for the same reason, if you look on the right, it's a bee, and it's because the name Deborah means like honeybee, and so again she's got a brooch that represents her name. The style of the picture of the honeybee that I've done there is based on an Egyptian, so it's like a period Egyptian depiction of a honeybee, so it's sort of stylized in that way. Okay, now I just realised we're running out of time, didn't get as far as I thought. He goes to her. they talk about should they go up against Sisera, and then he says, if you go, I'll go. At the end of the page, you can see that she says, she says, I will surely go with you. And I've intentionally broken what she says into two halves, so it's kind of like on the edge of the page she's saying, sure, I'll go, and then you get the kind of reveal, which is here, where she says, nevertheless, the journey that you take won't be for your honour, for God has sent Sisera into a woman's hand. So, because of his kind of lack of faith, and not necessarily just not like, oh, he's relying on a woman, which some people look at. It's just what I said a minute ago. He's like, if you're not going to go, I'm not going to go. So it's like, I'm not going to bother if you don't. So it's because of his kind of like double-mindedness, as James would call it. And then they go, and you can see the map in the middle there. I'll see if I can zoom in for you. So you see the picture of them walking along, and on the map is where they're going, Bethel and Ramah, which are down near Jerusalem basically, and then they're going all the way up north to Kadesh, so it's quite far, so that's where he's from, and that's where the Hatzor is up there as well. And so you can see she's going with him and his army, and then Barak calls the men of Zebulun and Naphtali together at Kadesh. You can see the banner of Naphtali there with the boats, and there's a banner with some Hebrew writing, and another one with an antelope, and they've got their horns on the banners and stuff. And again, the actual army, as always with the Israelites, is kind of that ragtag group. One's got a pick, one's got a pitchfork, another's got a big stick, another one's got a mallet, and the other one's got like an axe, and one's got a knife and things like that. So they're not a elite army, trained army group. We'll just conclude by looking at this image, as I have the reference ready for it. And they go to Kadesh. This is at Kadesh, and it introduces us to Heber the Kenite and his wife, Yael. And what I want to show you, though, is we'll talk about them next time, is the background has been drawn again from the real place. Oh, not that one. So you can, if you have a good look at that for a moment, you can see that in the centre of the image, this is from BibleWalks.com, by the way, which is a great website, the clear sort of man-made hill in the middle is where Kadesh was, and the little building is where I've put their little tent, essentially. And that's the little building. It's not massively relevant to the image, but it's the hill in the background, and then obviously the silhouette of the hill behind that. And so if I turn this off and go back to it, you can see the hill itself, the sort of motte, and then behind it the same background, and in the foreground you've got the big tree that they're going to talk about. Cool. Well, we'll end it there, and next time we'll pick up with Heber the Kenite and his wife Yael, and we'll see you next time. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.